There's a moment in every great Hollywood love story where the fairy tale quietly cracks, not with a dramatic explosion, not with a public scandal, but with something far more painful and far harder to explain. For Aaron Spelling, one of the most powerful television producers who ever lived, that moment played out over years, slowly and almost invisibly, inside a marriage that the world never fully understood. Before he died in 2006, Aaron finally spoke honestly about the woman who built him, the woman he could not hold on to, and the real reason a love that he himself once called the most important thing in his world eventually fell apart. What he revealed wasn't a scandal. It was something quieter, more complicated, and in many ways more heartbreaking than anything Hollywood gossip could have invented. This is that story. To understand why Aaron Spelling and Carolyn Jones divorced, you have to go back to the very beginning. Not to the divorce, not even to the marriage, but to who Aaron Spelling was before Carolyn Jones walked into his life. He was nobody. Not almost nobody. Actually nobody. He grew up in Dallas, Texas, the youngest son of Russian Jewish immigrant parents who had almost nothing. His father changed the family name from Sperling to Spelling somewhere along the way, a small act of reinvention that foreshadowed what his son would spend his entire life doing. Aaron grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, in his own words, in a small frame house where money was always short and the outside world was often cruel. At 8 years old, the anti-Semitic bullying from his Dallas schoolmates became so relentless, so constant, that his body literally gave out on him. He lost the use of his legs. Doctors would later understand it as psychosomatic, his mind, overwhelmed by trauma, shutting his body down. He spent nearly a year confined to bed, cut off from childhood, lying still while the rest of the world moved. But lying still gave him something he might never have found otherwise. He read obsessively. He imagined. He built entire worlds inside his head because his body wouldn't let him build anything anywhere else. When he finally recovered and walked back into the world, he carried that interior life with him like a secret weapon. He just didn't know yet what to do with it. After serving in World War II, where he earned a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart and entertained troops rather than fighting on the front lines, he enrolled at Southern Methodist University, graduated in 1949, and moved to Los Angeles to become an actor. What happened next is the kind of thing that Hollywood loves to pretend doesn't happen. Nothing happened. He got small parts, forgettable roles, background work. He appeared in over 40 television programs and a handful of films, but nothing stuck. His most memorable early acting moment was 3 weeks as a ragged beggar in the MGM musical Kismet, where his one line was, "Alms for the love of Allah." He repeated it over and over for 3 weeks. That experience, he later said, was the moment he understood that acting was not where he was supposed to be. The typewriter, he decided, was. The only problem was that nobody in Hollywood cared what Aaron Spelling had to say. Not yet. He had the dreams. He had the drive. What he didn't have was a door that would open for him. And then along came Carolyn Jones. She was not what you would expect. Not soft. Not deferential. Not the kind of woman who made a man feel comfortable. The first time Aaron encountered Carolyn, they couldn't stand each other. He was directing a small theater production. His leading lady had eloped 2 days before opening night, and Carolyn stepped in to fill the role. He handed her the script. She tossed it aside and went through the entire part from memory, which should have impressed him but instead irritated him. He was more annoyed than awed. She was sharp-tongued and self-possessed. He was guarded and still carrying the wounds of his first marriage, a brief, disastrous union with a wealthy university classmate who had left him the moment things got hard, departing with little more than a plane ticket her father sent her. That abandonment had given Aaron what he called a chip on his shoulder the size of a building when it came to women. But something about Carolyn's particular brand of honesty cut right through it. One night, sitting with a group of other young actors talking about their Hollywood dreams, Carolyn turned to Aaron, with whom she was still technically fighting, and said something that stopped him cold. She looked at him and asked, sincerely, what he could get out of it. Not romantically, just genuinely. It didn't seem fair to her that he was directing and not benefiting from the same opportunities they were all chasing. That unexpected moment of integrity, he would say for the rest of his life, was the exact moment he fell in love with her. They stayed out until 6:30 in the morning on their first real conversation, driving to the beach, sitting on the sand, talking about everything. By the time he got out of her car, he looked at her and said he thought he was going to marry her. And he did. In April 1953, Aaron Spelling and Carolyn Jones became husband and wife. What most people looking back at this marriage never quite grasp is the sheer imbalance of it in those early years, and the fact that Carolyn carried that imbalance not just willingly but lovingly. When they married, she was already a name in Hollywood. She had appeared in House of Wax. She had film credits building. She had momentum. He was, bluntly, her husband who was trying to write scripts that nobody was buying yet. The William Morris Agency signed Aaron Spelling as a writer during this period, primarily because they wanted Carolyn on their roster. He was a signing bonus, the price of getting her. He knew it. She knew it. And rather than letting that humiliate him or poison the marriage, Carolyn did something that Aaron never forgot for the rest of his life. She worked. She took roles she didn't want, parts she described privately as pure trash, jobs that held no artistic interest for her whatsoever, just so he could stay home and write without financial pressure crushing his concentration. She was the breadwinner, the believer, and the backbone of that household all at once. Aaron would later say, with a rawness that left little room for comfortable spin, that when they were first married, Carolyn took a lot of acting jobs that meant nothing to her, just so he could stay home and focus. He said he never forgot it. He meant it. You could hear it in how he said it decades later, not as a fact he had neatly filed away, but as something that still sat in his chest. She didn't just support him financially. She pushed him, sometimes past the point of comfort. When Aaron was still trying to hold on to acting even as the evidence mounted that it wasn't working, Carolyn was direct with him. Stop acting, she told him. Write. Take control of your own path. She helped circulate his scripts. She put his work in front of people who mattered. And when an opportunity finally cracked open through Dick Powell and 4-Star Productions, it was in large part because of doors that Carolyn had helped push. By 1960, Aaron was publicly declaring that Carolyn was the only person in the world he needed. He said they were more than in love. They were each other's best friends. He was not performing. By every account, he meant every word of it. But here's where the story takes the turn that nobody ever quite tells correctly. The same year Aaron said that, 1960, the cracks had already begun forming underneath the surface. Not because love had disappeared, because success was beginning to arrive, and it arrived unevenly, and it arrived with a cost nobody had calculated. Carolyn's career, which had been soaring through the late 1950s, an Academy Award nomination for The Bachelor Party in 1957, a Golden Globe for Marjorie Morningstar, praised performances in King Creole alongside Elvis Presley, arguably her finest work in career in 1959, began to plateau just as Aaron's career began to accelerate. The writing gigs multiplied. 4-Star Productions gave him a real foothold. Producers were returning his calls. The man who had been, for years, simply the husband of Carolyn Jones, was becoming someone in his own right. And the marriage, which had been built on a particular kind of gravity, her pulling things forward, him catching up, didn't quite know how to recalibrate when the weight began to shift. What Aaron eventually admitted, in reflections he gave in the years before his death, was that the marriage became something they both loved but could no longer live inside. He was specific about this in a way that matters. They separated in October 1963. The divorce was finalized in August 1964, and both of them, separately, said the same thing about it at the time, and for years afterward. They still loved each other. They simply could not live together anymore. That phrase, "we love each other but cannot live together," sounds like a polite Hollywood exit line, something people say to avoid saying something worse. But in this case, by every credible account, it was simply true. The friendship between them did not end with the marriage. They continued to see each other. They spoke well of each other publicly in ways that had no performance in them. Aaron was, according to those who knew them both, the one who encouraged Carolyn to take the role of Morticia Addams in the Addams Family, the role that would define her legacy after their divorce was already done. He saw something in that part that she initially hesitated over, and he pushed her toward it the same way she had once pushed him toward his writing. Even divorced, they were still, in small and quiet ways, taking care of each other. The deeper truth Aaron carried, and shared with increasing candor in his later years, was that success itself had been the disruptor. Not infidelity, not betrayal, not any single explosive event. The marriage had been built around a shared struggle, and when that struggle resolved differently for each of them, the structure that had held them together no longer fit. He had needed her more than she had needed him in the beginning, and she had given that support without hesitation or resentment. But as his world expanded and hers began to narrow, as his name grew larger and her opportunities grew fewer, as the industry that had once celebrated her began to see only Morticia when it looked at her face, something in the equilibrium between them broke beyond repair. He could not undo that. He knew it. He carried it. Carolyn Jones spent the years after their divorce fighting for the career she had sacrificed so much to build. She appeared on the road when the industry closed its doors. She married her voice coach Herbert Green in 1968 and moved to Palm Springs, but Hollywood pulled her back, and she returned alone in 1977. She found her way onto Aaron's own shows, Fantasy Island, The Love Boat, appearing in programs built by the man she had once supported when he had nothing. There's something almost unbearably poignant about that detail. And then in 1981, she was diagnosed with colon cancer. She kept working. She took the role of scheming matriarch Myrna Clegg on the soap opera Capital in 1982 and held on to it even as the cancer worsened, even as she was eventually confined to a wheelchair, performing her scenes in pain because she had decided that she would not stop. She married her longtime partner Peter Bailey Britton in September 1982, choosing to hold something steady as everything else slipped. When the end was close, she told her sister, Bet, that she wanted her epitaph to say she gave joy to the world. She died on August 3, 1983. She was 53 years old. Aaron, by that point, was a man at the absolute peak of his powers. Charlie's Angels, Dynasty, The Love Boat, Fantasy Island all behind him or still running. He made sure, during her final months, that she had a case of the finest champagne delivered to her home every single day. It was all she could keep down near the end. He sent it anyway, every day. Aaron Spelling passed away on June 23, 2006, in his 123-room mansion in the Holmby Hills neighborhood of Los Angeles after suffering a stroke. He was 83 years old and had become, by that point, the most prolific television producer in American history. 218 producer credits, more than 3,000 hours of television, a record that still stands. In the years before he died, when he spoke about Carolyn, he did not speak about her with the careful distance of someone trying to present a clean narrative. He spoke about her the way a person speaks about something they understand better in hindsight than they ever did in the moment. He had loved her. She had made him. He had not been able to hold the marriage together when the thing that built it, his need, her belief, their shared uncertainty, resolved itself on uneven terms. That was the truth. Not a scandal, not a secret someone was hiding. Just two people who loved each other enormously, who grew in directions that pulled them away from each other rather than toward, and who could not find a way back once the distance had set. He never pretended otherwise, and neither, for the record, did she. What lingers about this story, what makes it worth telling long after both of them are gone, is not the drama of the divorce, but the texture of the relationship around it. The way she believed in him before anyone else did. The way he quietly made sure she had champagne to survive on when she was dying. The way they remained, in some essential part of themselves, each other's people even when they were no longer each other's spouses. Hollywood produces a great many love stories. It produces very few that look like this one. Imperfect, uneven, painful, and real in every direction that matters. Aaron Spelling built an empire from scratch, from nothing, from a sickly kid in Dallas, with no legs and no money and nothing but imagination. Carolyn Jones gave him the time and the belief to do it. And whatever you make of how the marriage ended, that exchange, that debt, that specific form of love, it was real. And Aaron Spelling, at least, never let himself forget it.